a wood-burning stove, massive, cast iron, bolted to a slab of slate in the floor of a frozen forest house, and underneath it, a trapdoor no one was ever meant to find. The house stands 3 stories tall in the deep snow of the Bitterroot Mountains, boarded windows, sagging porch, a place where the wind howls and the silence is heavier than the cold. Inside, a girl kneels by the stove, 19 years old. Her hands are shaking, not from the cold, from what she has just pried loose. A flashlight beam cuts down into a black mouth in the floor. Outside, headlights crawl up the unplowed driveway. A black SUV. A man in a $1,000 parka, sweat on his upper lip in 14-degree weather. He has driven 3 hours through a blizzard. For a tear-down cabin, he knows what is under that floor. She does not. Not yet. The kitchen was so cold, she could see her own breath. Elspeth Kavanaugh stood by the rusted sink, 19 years old, 5'3" in wool socks, holding a thermometer with a cracked screen, 103.2. Linus was burning up. Again, 3rd time this month. She set the thermometer on the chipped formica counter, pressed her palms flat, breathed in, out, because if she breathed wrong, if she let the panic catch hold of her chest, she would scream, and screaming wouldn't bring down his fever. Screaming wouldn't pay rent. Screaming wouldn't do a single useful thing in this world. So she breathed. Behind her, Linus coughed, a small wet cough from the couch in the living room. 7 years old, wrapped in the quilt their mother had stitched the winter before the cancer. Cheeks flush, eyelashes damp. He looked so much like their mother in that moment, Elspeth had to turn her face to the window. The window was iced over. Tacoma in February. Gray sky, gray rain freezing into sleet, gray dumpster across the alley, a whole world the color of dishwater. She walked to the front door, bent down, picked up the white envelope that had been slid under the door at 5:13 that morning. She knew it was 5:13 because she'd heard the footsteps in the hallway and lay very still on the mattress on the floor and watched the clock above the stove blink. Final notice of eviction. 4 days, 96 hours. She put the envelope on the counter next to the thermometer. Elsie Linus's voice, small, croaky. "Yeah, bug. Can I have water?" "Coming." She turned on the tap. The pipe shuddered. The water ran rusty for 10 seconds before it ran clear. She filled a chipped Disney mug. Cinderella. The handle had broken off years ago, and she'd glued it with super glue, and now it sometimes came off in your hand if you weren't careful, so you had to be careful. She brought it to him, knelt by the couch, held the mug while he drank. His lips were cracked. His forehead was damp. "Mom used to put a cold rag on my head," he said. "I know, bug. Can you do that?" "Yeah, I can do that." She went to the bathroom, wet the only clean washcloth they had, wrung it, folded it, came back, pressed it against his forehead. He closed his eyes, smiled a small, tired smile, said, "You smell like Mom." And Elspeth Kavanaugh, 19 years old with $19.42 in her checking account, did not cry. Not yet. She waited until he was asleep, until his breathing went soft and even, until the wet cough had quieted into something that sounded almost like normal sleep. Then she went into the bathroom, closed the door, sat on the edge of the bathtub, and let it come. Quiet crying, the kind you learn to do when you have a little brother sleeping 10 feet away and walls thin as paper. Because here is what she knew. Linus needed a doctor. Linus did not have insurance. The free clinic was 40 minutes away by bus. and she'd have to leave him alone or take him out into the freezing rain, and either way, it would mean missing her night shift at the diner, and missing the night shift meant losing the job, and losing the job meant losing the rent she didn't have anyway, and 4 days until they were on the street. She had no family, none that counted. Her mother was buried in a cemetery on the south side of Tacoma. Her father had left when she was 10. There was an aunt somewhere in Phoenix who hadn't returned a call in 8 years. There was no one, just her and Linus, and $19.42. She wiped her face on the sleeve of her sweatshirt, stood up, looked at herself in the mirror over the sink. The mirror was cracked diagonally and made her face look split into 2 different girls. One of them looked tired, the other one looked angry. Good, she thought. Stay angry. Anger gets things done. That was when the phone rang. She didn't recognize the number. Seattle area code. She let it ring 3 times, considered not answering, because nothing good ever came from a Seattle area code calling her at 7 in the morning. But she answered. Hello? Is this Elspeth Kavanaugh? The voice was older, male, educated, the kind of voice that pronounced every syllable like it cost money. Who's asking? My name is Phineas Drexler. I'm an attorney with Drexler, Hollins, and Bray. Am I speaking with Miss Kavanaugh? I haven't done anything. A pause on the line, a small dry laugh. You're not in any trouble, Miss Kavanaugh. I'm calling regarding the estate of your great-uncle Cornelius Pembroke. She didn't say anything, because she had never heard that name in her life. Miss Kavanaugh, are you still there? I don't know anyone named Cornelius Pembroke. I'm aware. He was your mother's uncle, your maternal grandmother's brother. He passed away 3 weeks ago. You are, as it happens, his sole surviving blood relative. Elspeth sat down on the kitchen floor. The linoleum was cold through her sweatpants. Miss Kavanaugh, I'm listening. I'd very much like for you to come to my office in Seattle. There are matters concerning your inheritance that I cannot discuss over the phone. Are you available tomorrow at 10? Inheritance. Yes. Of what? Best discussed in person. Elspeth looked at the eviction notice on the counter, looked at her sleeping brother on the couch, looked at the cracked mirror behind the open bathroom door where the 2 halves of her face had been split into a tired girl and an angry girl. The angry girl was winning. I'll be there. The law office of Drexler, Hollins, and Bray sat on the 42nd floor of a glass tower downtown. Elspeth had borrowed a clean blouse from the woman next door. She had washed her hair in the kitchen sink because the apartment's hot water had been cut off 2 weeks ago. She had put Linus in the only sweater that still fit him. The receptionist looked at them like they were a smell. Mr. Drexler will see you now. The conference room had a view of Elliott Bay, gray water, gray sky, a ferry crawling across the horizon like an insect. Phineas Drexler stood when she entered. He was 60, maybe 65, silver hair combed back, a suit that probably cost more than her car. He had the soft, careful manners of a man who had spent 40 years telling rich people things they didn't want to hear. Miss Kavanaugh, thank you for coming. You said inheritance. He gestured for her to sit. She sat. Linus crawled into the chair beside her and pulled out a coloring book, a red crayon. He began to color the sky. Drexler opened a manila folder. Your great-uncle Cornelius Pembroke passed away on the 17th of January. He died in his home in the Bitterroot Mountains of Montana. He left no spouse, no children, and a will that has been on file at this firm for 19 years. Bitterroot Mountains, yes. Of Montana, yes. I've never been to Montana. I'm aware. He pushed a photograph across the table. It was a black and white image, a man in a heavy wool coat standing in front of a tall asymmetrical house, 3 stories, steep roof, boarded windows, the kind of house you saw in horror movies and assumed the set designers had exaggerated. "This is the property," Drexler said, 40 acres of timberland. The house was built in 1894 and renovated in 1969. It is fully off-grid. The nearest town, a place called Glenmore, is 41 miles to the east. There is no mortgage. No mortgage. None. Elspeth's heart did a small, ridiculous thing, a lift, a flutter, the first sweet flutter of hope she had felt in 2 years. "It's mine," conditionally. Of course it was conditional. Nothing in her life had ever not been conditional. "There is an unpaid property tax lien against the estate," Drexler said. "Total balance due, including penalties and accumulated interest, is $84,000 and change. The state of Montana has issued a final notice. You have 21 days to pay the lien in full or the property will be seized and sold at public auction." Elspeth stared at him. "I have $19, she said. "I understand. I have $19.42. Yes, I cannot pay $84,000 in 21 days. That Miss Kavanaugh is the situation." She wanted to laugh, and she wanted to scream, and she wanted to grab the manila folder and throw it through the floor-to-ceiling window and watch it sail down 42 stories into Elliott Bay. Instead, she said, "Why are you telling me this?" Drexler studied her for a long moment. "Because there is a second clause," he said, "and it is, I will admit, somewhat unusual." He turned a page. "Your great-uncle's will explicitly forbids the involvement of any third-party estate, liquidator, professional appraiser, real estate agent, or member of any law enforcement agency on the property for a period of 30 days following his death. If you violate this clause, if you bring in any outside firm, contractor, or government official to evaluate or clear the estate within that window, the property does not pass to you. It passes instead to a private trust whose terms are sealed." "That doesn't make any sense." "I agree. What does he expect me to do? Walk in there alone?" "That Miss Kavanaugh appears to be precisely what he expected. You must take physical possession of the house yourself within the 30-day window, alone or with whomever you choose to bring of your own personal volition, but no professionals, no agents, no officers." She looked at Linus. He was coloring the sky red. He had used up most of the crayon. His tongue was poking out of the corner of his mouth. "Why me?" she said. "You are his only blood relative." "He never met me. He had photographs of you." She froze. "What?" Drexler reached into his folder, pulled out a small Polaroid, slid it across the table. Elspeth picked it up. It was a picture of her, aged maybe 7 or 8, standing on the steps of her elementary school in Tacoma, wearing a yellow rain slicker, holding a lunchbox. She did not remember the picture being taken. She turned it over. On the back, in careful blue handwriting, were the words Elspeth, 1st grade, October. She has her grandmother's eyes. Her hand shook. "He had this," she whispered. "He had a great many of them. There is a box. It is in the house." She set the Polaroid down very carefully, as if it might shatter. "What is in that house, Mr. Drexler?" The old lawyer met her eyes. "I don't know," he said, "and I will confess to you, Miss Kavanaugh, I do not entirely wish to know. Your great-uncle was a careful man, a private man. He worked for 30 years as a senior archivist at Carringford Trust Bank in London before he abruptly resigned in the mid-1990s and emigrated to the American wilderness. He was by every account brilliant. He was also by every account deeply afraid of something. The terms of this will were drafted under that fear, and I am only the man who reads it aloud. Elspeth stared at the Polaroid, a girl in a yellow rain slicker, a great uncle she had never met, a house in the snow, $84,000 in 21 days. She had nothing left to lose. That was the thing about hitting bottom. The floor was finally the floor. There was nothing left to fall toward. Whatever happened next happened upward. "I'll go," she said. The drive into Montana took 3 days. She left Tacoma on a Wednesday morning. The Honda CR-V had 213,000 miles on it and a broken heater and one windshield wiper that worked. She packed everything they owned into the back, 2 duffel bags, a box of Linus's books, a box of her mother's recipes, the quilt, the Disney mug, a cast iron skillet that had belonged to her grandmother, a photograph of her mother smiling on a beach. She left the eviction notice on the counter. She did not look back. The first day they made it to Spokane, she paid for a roadside motel in cash, $42 for a room with a sagging bed and a heater that smelled like burning wires. She and Linus slept in the same bed. She held him through the night because he was still warm with fever and because she was scared and didn't know which of them was holding the other. The second day, the snow began. By the time they crossed into Idaho, the road was white. By the time they reached Coeur d'Alene, the windshield wipers couldn't keep up. By the time they crossed into Montana, the world had narrowed to 2 tunnels of yellow headlight cutting through a wall of falling snow. The radio said blizzard warning, Bitterroot range, accumulations up to 26 inches. The GPS said turn right in 40 miles. The thermometer on the dashboard said 14 degrees. Linus was asleep in the passenger seat. His face was pressed against the window. His breath fogged the glass and froze in tiny crystals where it touched. Elspeth drove with both hands on the wheel, knuckles white, jaw clenched, wipers thumping. She thought about her mother. Her mother had a saying. She used to whisper it when the gas had been turned off, or when the electric company called, or when the school called about a fee Elspeth couldn't pay. She used to take Elspeth's face in her hands and look her dead in the eye and say, "You are not what happens to you. You are what you do next." Elspeth had heard it 1,000 times. She heard it again now. She gripped the wheel harder. They reached the property after dark. The GPS gave up 2 miles before. The road narrowed. The snow piled higher. She drove the last stretch in low gear, the tires fishtailing, the engine groaning. She didn't dare stop. Stopping meant getting stuck. Getting stuck meant freezing to death. And then, through the trees, a shape. The house rose out of the snow like something that had been waiting a long time. 3 stories, asymmetrical, a high steep roof black against the falling white, 2 stone chimneys, long narrow windows boarded over with weathered planks, a wraparound porch sagging in the middle. It did not look like a home. It looked like a place where homes went to die. She pulled up close, cut the engine, sat in the silence. Linus stirred, blinked, looked out the window. "Is that it?" he said. "That's it." "It's big." "Yeah." "Are there monsters?" She looked at him, her sweet brother, 7 years old, wrapped in their mother's quilt, eyes still glassy from fever. "No bug, no monsters." "Promise, promise." She lied. She got out of the car. The cold hit her like a slap. Her breath plumed. Her ears burned. She trudged through knee-deep snow to the front porch. The key Phineas Drexler had given her was an old brass thing on a leather fob. It fit. It turned. The door swung open with a long, slow groan that seemed to come from inside the wood itself. She fumbled for her phone, turned on the flashlight. The beam cut across a wide hall, wood floors, a staircase rising into darkness. A grandfather clock standing silent in the corner hand stopped at 4:15, wallpaper peeling in long strips, the smell of dust and old paper and something else, something darker, machine oil maybe, or old leather. She brought Linus inside, set him on a chair by the door, wrapped him tighter in the quilt. "Stay here, Bug. I'm gonna make a fire." Okay. She found a wood-burning stove in the room to the left, a massive cast-iron thing black with age, bolted to a thick slab of slate, set into the floor, a stack of split firewood beside it, kindling in a copper bucket, a box of long matches. Cornelius Pembroke had left her firewood. He had known someone would come. He had wanted her warm. She thought he had photographs of me. She thought he had photographs of me, and I never knew his name. She built the fire. It caught. The kindling crackled. The flames climbed. Within 20 minutes, the small living room had begun to warm. She pulled an old quilted blanket from a basket, settled Linus on the sagging floral sofa, sat beside him. He fell asleep almost at once. Elspeth did not sleep. She sat in the firelight and looked around the room. Books everywhere, floor-to-ceiling shelves crammed with leather-bound volumes, filing cabinets in the corner, a heavy oak desk piled with papers, a framed photograph on the mantel. She got up, walked over, picked it up. A man in his 50s, sharp features, dark eyes, standing in front of a low stone building in what looked like a foreign country. A young woman beside him, blonde, smiling, and a small boy on the man's shoulders. The boy was laughing. He had front teeth missing. He looked about Linus's age. She turned the picture over, written on the back in faded ink Imogene. Florian, London, 1992. She stared at it for a long time. Then she set it back on the mantel, very gently, as if it might break. She did not sleep that night. She watched the fire. She watched Linus. She listened to the house breathe around her, the creaks and groans of a building too old to stay quiet. And somewhere in the small, dark hours, she felt a thing she had not felt in a long time. Not safety, just stillness. It would have to be enough. The knock came at 9 in the morning. 3 sharp raps, authoritative, practiced. Elspeth had been making instant coffee on the wood stove. She froze, her hand on the kettle, her heart in her throat. Linus was still asleep on the couch. The fire had burned down to embers. Outside the boarded windows, the world was blinding white. The knock came again. She set down the kettle, picked up the iron poker from beside the stove, walked to the front door, stood for a moment with her hand on the knob. Then she opened it. The man on the porch was tall, 40-something, olive parka with fur trim that probably cost $1,000, polished leather boots, a silver watch on his wrist, a smile that was just slightly too wide for his face. Miss Kavanagh, he knew her name. "Who are you?" "Roderick Crane, Crane Land Holdings. I left a card with the county office. I monitor probate filings in the region. I'm so very sorry for your loss." He extended a gloved hand. She did not take it. He didn't seem surprised. He let the hand fall, tilted his head, studied her with eyes the color of weak tea. "May I come in?" No. A small flicker behind those eyes, something cold passing through. "I understand. Of course. May we speak on the porch?" "What do you want, Mr. Crane?" "Your time. 5 minutes, perhaps less." She stepped out onto the porch, closed the door behind her. The cold was vicious. She wrapped her arms around herself. Talk, he smiled. I'm aware of your situation, Miss Kavanaugh. The lean, the deadline, the difficulties. I'm also aware that you have a young child inside, a brother, I believe. How do you know that? It's a small county. It is not a small county. The smile got wider. I am prepared, he said, to make you a very fair offer. Today, cash, $92,000. That clears your tax lien with a small margin to spare. You walk away with your dignity. You take your brother back too. Wherever it is you came from, you start over, clean. $92,000. Elspeth felt the number land in her chest like a heavy stone. $92,000 meant Linus saw a doctor. $92,000 meant rent for a year. $92,000 meant a bed for him that wasn't a couch. It meant cereal. It meant medicine. It meant breath. She looked at Roderick Crane, and here was the strange thing. Here was the thing that made her instincts curl up like a fist. He was sweating in the freezing cold, in an olive parka, in 14-degree weather. There was a bead of sweat at his temple. His upper lip was damp. His eyes kept flicking past her shoulder, past her face, past her body, into the dark of the house behind her. He wasn't looking at her at all. He was looking at the house. He wanted this house. He wanted it badly. He had driven 3 hours through a blizzard to stand on her porch and offer her $92,000 for a tear-down cabin that on paper was worth a fraction of that. Her mother's voice in her ear, "You are not what happens to you. You are what you do next." "No," Elspeth said. The smile faltered. "I'm sorry. No, thank you, Mr. Crane. Miss Kavanaugh, I don't think you fully grasp the urgency of your—" "I've grasped it fine. $84,000. I know. 21 days. I know. And then the state takes everything. I know." She lifted her chin. "I said no." His face did something then, a small thing, a muscle in his jaw clenching and unclenching, the friendly mask shifting just enough to show what was underneath it, and what was underneath it was not friendly. He took a breath. He smoothed his face back. He reached into his coat, pulled out a business card, held it between 2 fingers. "My number," he said. "When you change your mind." "I won't." "You will." A pause, a long, careful pause. "The mountain doesn't forgive, Miss Kavanaugh. Not in winter, not anyone, not even careful young women with sick little brothers. Accidents happen out here. The road back to Glenmore is treacherous. The pipes in old houses freeze. Fires start. People disappear." He smiled again. She held the card. 2 days, he said. "I'll come back in 2 days. Have a better answer for me." He turned, walked down the porch steps, through the snow, to a black SUV idling near the tree line. He got in. The engine roared. The vehicle reversed. It rolled away through the white. Elspeth stood on the porch in the cold until she could no longer hear it. Then she went inside, closed the door, locked it, set the iron poker against the wall, sat down on the floor of the front hall, and began very quietly to shake. She did not let Linus see. She did not let herself cry. She sat on the floor of a dead man's house with a sick brother on the couch in the next room, and a tax lien she could not pay, and a developer who had just threatened her life, and she made herself a list. A list was a thing you could make when you could not make anything else. 1. Find out who Cornelius Pembroke was. 2. Find out what is in this house. 3. Find out why Roderick Crane wants it. The fire in the wood stove had burned to embers. She got up, added logs, stoked it, watched the flames climb back, felt the small warm hand of heat reach her face. Then she began to search. She spent the rest of that day going through the house. The first floor, the living room with the wood stove, the kitchen narrow and old-fashioned copper pots on iron hooks, a hand pump at the sink for well water, a small library with a leather chair and an unlit fireplace, a locked door at the end of the hall that she could not find a key for. The second floor, 3 bedrooms, a bathroom with a clawfoot tub, a linen closet stacked with carefully folded sheets that smelled of lavender. The master bedroom was the largest, a high 4-poster bed, a wardrobe of dark walnut, a roll-top desk by the window. The third floor was an attic. It was the attic she ended up in by late afternoon, with Linus napping again by the wood stove, her phone flashlight in her hand, climbing the narrow steps under the eaves. The attic was astonishing. It was a museum. Filing cabinets stood in long, neat rows, wooden crates stacked along the walls, boxes labeled in careful handwriting, correspondence, 1971 to 1975, banking records, 1980 to 1985, personal photographs, Russian Imperial Archive, London period. The labels went on and on. The handwriting was the same handwriting that had been on the back of the Polaroid Drexler had shown her. Careful, blue, precise. Her great-uncle had been a man who kept things. She opened the box labeled personal photographs. Inside were stacks of envelopes, each one marked with a name and a date. She thumbed through them. Elspeth, age 4, Elspeth, age 5, Elspeth, age 7, Elspeth, age 12, Linus, age 2, Linus, age 4, Linus, age 6. Photographs of her entire life, photographs of her brother's life, photographs from school, from playgrounds, from sidewalks she had walked down without ever knowing anyone was watching. She sat down on the dusty floor with the box in her lap, and she cried. She cried for a long time. She cried for her mother. She cried for the lonely old man who had loved them from 40 miles away and 40 acres deep and never said a word. She cried because she did not know how to feel about any of it. Was it tender? Was it sad? Was it love? Was it grief? Was it all of those things at once? She wiped her face on her sleeve, set the box aside, kept searching. That was when she found the second photograph. It was in a thin envelope at the very bottom of a crate labeled Simply London. The envelope was sealed, but the seal had cracked with age. She slid the picture out, black and white, glossy. 2 men. The first man was Cornelius Pembroke, younger, perhaps 50, wearing a dark suit, standing in front of an old stone building with brass letters on the facade. The letters read, Carringford Trust Bank. The second man was younger, maybe 35, thin, a receding hairline, dark eyes, a tight smile. He had his hand on Cornelius Pembroke's shoulder. The gesture looked almost friendly. Almost. She turned the photograph over. There were 2 lines of handwriting on the back. The first was in Cornelius's familiar careful blue. Edmund Crane, Director Special Accounts, London, 1991. The second line was in a different hand, harder, angrier, black ink, pressed in so hard the paper had nearly torn. He was the worst man I ever worked for. Elspeth stopped breathing. Edmund Crane. Crane. She thought of the man on her porch. Roderick Crane. Crane Land Holdings. She looked at the face in the photograph, the receding hairline, the tight smile, the hand on Cornelius's shoulder, the eyes. The eyes were the same flat tea-colored eyes she had stared into across her porch that morning. Aged 30 years, set into a different face, but the same shape, the same coldness. This was Roderick Crane's father, or his grandfather, or someone close enough by blood that the same face had passed down through generations like an heirloom. Her great-uncle had worked for this man. Her great-uncle had hated this man. He was the worst man I ever worked for. And now, 30 years later, that man's descendant had driven 3 hours through a blizzard to stand on her porch and offer her $92,000 to walk away from a house full of secrets. This was not a real estate deal. This was something older. This was something that had been waiting for her. Elspeth held the photograph in her hands, and she felt for the first time in her life that she had not stumbled into anything at all. She had been walked into it by her great-uncle, by her mother, by a woman named Imogene smiling on a London street with a small boy on a man's shoulders. She had been walked into something that had been arranged for her very carefully a long time ago. She took the photograph downstairs. She put it on the mantel beside the picture of Imogen and Florian. She made dinner for Linus, canned soup, crackers, the last of the apple juice in the bottom of her duffel bag. She tucked him under the quilt. She read to him until he fell asleep. The phone rang at 11:14, unknown number. She knew who it was before she answered. She picked it up, held it to her ear, did not speak. Miss Kavanagh, Roderick Crane. She said nothing. I forgot to mention, earlier, on the porch, a small administrative detail. She waited. Your apartment in Tacoma. The landlord has changed the locks. Earlier than expected, I'm told. Apparently a friend of his works in the building. Heard you'd vacated. Decided to expedite the process. Your belongings have been placed in storage. A small fee applies, of course. But the point is, Miss Kavanagh, you have no home to go back to. Silence. Now, he said, about that offer. She hung up. She stood in the dark hallway of a dead man's house with the phone in her hand and the wind outside howling against the boarded windows. She looked at her sleeping brother in the firelight. She looked at the 2 photographs on the mantel, Cornelius and Imogene, Cornelius and Edmund Crane, a small voice in her chest, very small, very steady. There is no way back. There is only forward. She set the phone down, walked to the wood stove, added another log, watched the flames take it, sat down on the rug beside her brother, and pulled the quilt over her own shoulders. She did not sleep that night either. She sat awake until dawn, and in the gray hour before sunrise, when the window panes had just begun to turn from black to blue, Elspeth Kavanagh, 19 years old with no home and no money, and a sick brother and a tax lien she could not pay, made herself a promise. She would not run, she would not sell, she would not break whatever her great-uncle had hidden in this house, whatever Roderick Crane wanted to bury, whatever the long old wound was that had reached its way through 3 generations to find her on a freezing Montana morning. She was going to find it first. She was going to find it, and she was going to make them sorry they ever knew her name. The town of Glenmore was a slip of a place, 1 main street, a post office the size of a closet, a diner with frost on the windows, a volunteer fire station with 1 truck, a bookshop, a library, a general store with a hand-painted sign that read, Easton since 1962. Elspeth drove in at 9 in the morning. Linus was bundled in the passenger seat, quilt over his shoulders, a cinnamon roll in his hand from a gas station outside Drummond. He was feeling better. The fever had broken in the night, color back in his cheeks. He was watching the snow with the open wonder of a boy who had never seen mountains until 2 days ago. Bug. Stay close to me, okay? Why? Because. Because why? Because I said because. He grinned. He chewed his cinnamon roll. He did not press. Elspeth parked outside the bookshop. The sign in the window read, Yarrow's Books, Rare, Used, and Curious. A bell jingled when she pushed the door open. Inside, the air was warm, the smell of old paper and coffee, towers of books on every flat surface, a pot-belly stove burning low in the back, a black cat asleep on a stack of National Geographics, and behind the counter, a woman. She was small, 78 perhaps, white hair piled in a loose bun, a long blue cardigan, half-moon glasses on a chain. She was reading a book. She did not look up. Be with you in a moment, she said. I'm at a very good part. Elspeth waited. Linus pressed his face against the glass of a display case full of antique compasses. The woman finished her page, closed the book, set it down, raised her eyes, and stopped. She stopped completely, the way a clock stops, the way breath stops. She looked at Elspeth's face, and her own face went very pale. Oh, she whispered. Are you all right? Oh dear. The old woman set both palms flat on the counter. She was trembling. She drew in a long, careful breath. Her glasses had slid down her nose. She did not push them back up. You're his niece, she said. Elspeth froze. How do you know that? You have her face, dear God. You have her face. Whose face? Your mother's. Elspeth could not breathe, because no one had said her mother's face to her in 2 years. No one, not one person. Her mother was a grave on the south side of Tacoma. Her mother was a photograph in a duffel bag. Her mother was a quilt. And now a stranger in a Montana bookshop had taken one look at her and known. You knew my mother. I knew her in pictures. Cornelius sent them. Cornelius sent everything. The old woman came around the counter. Her hands were shaking. She took Elspeth's face between her palms, the way a grandmother might, the way no one had touched her in a long time. Child, she said, oh, child, I am so sorry. I am so sorry he never met you. I am so sorry. Elspeth's eyes burned. She did not cry. She had promised herself she would not cry, not in front of strangers, not in front of Linus, not until this was over. The old woman saw the burning. She let go, stepped back, wiped her own eyes with the cuff of her cardigan. I'm Beatrix, she said, Beatrix Yarrow. Your great-uncle and I were correspondents for 25 years. He wrote to me every month, sometimes twice. I have a box of his letters in the back, a whole box. He sent me your school photographs. He sent me your brother's drawings. He sent me a copy of your high school diploma when you graduated. He sent you my diploma. He was very proud. Elspeth sat down on a chair beside the wood stove. She had to sit. Her knees had stopped working. Linus drifted over, sensed something was happening, climbed into her lap, watched the old woman with grave 7-year-old eyes. Hello, Beatrix said to him. Hi. You must be Linus. How did you know my name? Your uncle told me. He died. I know, sweetheart. I know. The old woman knelt in front of him, knees creaking. She reached into the pocket of her cardigan and pulled out a butterscotch candy in a yellow wrapper. She held it out. Linus looked at Elspeth. Elspeth nodded. He took it, unwrapped it, put it in his mouth. The little ritual of a child being given something sweet by a stranger who was not really a stranger at all. Beatrix stood, looked at Elspeth. I think, she said, we had better have tea. The kitchen behind the bookshop was small and warm, a kettle whistling on a gas burner, a bowl of clementines on a scarred pine table, a window looking out at a back garden buried in snow, a cardinal at a feeder, red against white. Beatrix poured tea into two mismatched cups. She set Linus up at the table with a stack of children's books from the shop and a second butterscotch and a wink. She drew her own chair close to Elspeth's. She wrapped her cold hands around her cup. She took a long breath. "Ask me," she said. "Whatever you need to know, ask me." Elspeth looked at her. She did not know where to start, so she said, "Who was he?" Beatrix smiled, small, sad. "Cornelius Pembroke," she said, "was the loneliest man I have ever known, and the most loving, and the most afraid. Three things at once, all his life. Afraid of what?" The old woman set down her cup. She looked at Elspeth a long time before she spoke. "Of the men who killed his wife." Elspeth did not move. She had heard the word killed. She had heard the word wife. But the words sat in the air a moment before they meant anything, until they did, until they fell on her like a stone. He had a wife. Her name was Imogene. She was a librarian at the British Museum. She had freckles. She laughed at her own jokes. She made him a better man than he was without her. And they killed her. They burned her. The kettle ticked on the stove. A clock somewhere in the shop chimed the hour. Linus turned a page. Elspeth's hands had gone cold. "Tell me," she said. Beatrix did. Cornelius worked for Carringford Trust Bank in London. He was a senior archivist. He was the man they trusted with everything the bank did not want anyone to see. The vaults, the records, the old accounts. He had been there since he was 22. He knew every closet, every box, every dead client, every buried thing. Her voice had gone low, confidential, the voice of a woman telling a story she had carried for 30 years. In late 1992, he discovered something. I never knew exactly what. He would never tell me in letters. He said in letters it was not safe. He said only this. He said, "I have found a wrong Beatrix that has waited 100 years to be set right, and the men who want it to stay buried are not the kind of men who let inconvenient archivists retire to the country." He went to his superiors. He went to one man, the wrong man, a man named Edmund Crane, the director of what they called special accounts. Cornelius believed Edmund was honorable. Edmund Crane was not honorable. Elspeth's mouth had gone dry. What did Edmund do? He smiled. He thanked Cornelius. He said the matter would be investigated. And then in February of 1993, Imogene Pembroke and her little boy Florian were home one afternoon. Florian was 6 years old. He was a small, bright boy with a missing front tooth. He had a stuffed rabbit named Mr. Biscuit. He liked to make pancakes with his mother on Saturdays. He liked dinosaurs. He liked his father very much. Beatrix's eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. The house caught fire. It was ruled an electrical fault. There was a faulty heater in the wall. It was a very tidy fire, very contained. The house next door was fine. The flat above was fine. Only the Pembroke flat burned. Imogene and Florian were both upstairs, both asleep, the report said. The smoke alarms did not work. They had been disconnected, the report said. Imogene was a careful woman. She tested those alarms every month. It was murder. It was murder. And no one. The investigators ruled it an accident. The bank sent flowers. Edmund Crane gave the eulogy. He cried at the service. Cornelius watched him cry. And he knew, child. He knew exactly what Edmund Crane was. Elspeth's hands shook around her teacup. Then why didn't he? What would he do? Beatrix said softly. Tell me what he would have done. He was 48 years old, a widower with no family left in England, a junior archivist, by title even with all his seniority, up against the most powerful private bank in London. He had no proof. He had only the timing. He had only what he knew. He should have gone to the police. He went to the police, child. He went the next morning. He told them everything. They listened. They wrote things down. And 48 hours later, he was visited at his flat by two gentlemen in suits who said they understood his grief, but that wild accusations could lead to lawsuits and that perhaps he should consider a sabbatical. He ran. He ran. He liquidated everything he owned. He emigrated. He bought 40 acres in the Bitterroot Mountains because no one ever came to the Bitterroot Mountains. He built a fortress. He waited for the rest of his life to be over, and he wrote me letters. Why you? Because I was his cousin, the only family he had left in the world. Imogen was an only child. Cornelius's parents were long dead. There was you, there was your mother, there was me, that was all. And when your mother passed, child, oh, he grieved for her like he grieved for his own. Elspeth stared at the surface of her tea. Why didn't he come to us? He was afraid he would bring it down on you. He was afraid the men who burned his wife would find his sister's daughter. He stayed away to keep you safe. He watched you from a long way off. He paid for things, child, things you never knew. What things? Your high school field trip to Washington in 10th grade. He paid for that. Your brother's appendectomy when he was 4 years old. He paid for that. The textbooks for your first semester of community college. He paid for those. Elspeth set down the cup. She put both hands over her face. She did not cry. She did not let herself. But she sat very still for a long time, and in that stillness, she felt the world tilt 1 degree on its axis and settle somewhere new. When she lowered her hands, Beatrix was watching her. He loved you, child, the old woman said, from very far away, with his whole tired heart. He loved you. Linus was watching them too. He had stopped reading. He had the butterscotch tucked in his cheek. Elsie, he said. Yeah, Bug. Are you sad? A little bit? Why? Because someone we didn't know loved us a lot. Linus thought about this. That's a good kind of sad, he said. Elspeth laughed. It came out broken, wet. It came out anyway. Beatrix poured her more tea. She told her the rest over the second cup. Edmund Crane had died in 2007, a heart attack at his country estate in Sussex. Cornelius had received the news with what he wrote in his letter as no satisfaction at all. Edmund had left behind a son named Roland. Roland was thin and quiet and reportedly a disappointment to his father. Roland had himself fathered one boy, a boy named Roderick. Roderick Crane. You know him. He came to my door. Beatrix went very still. When? Yesterday. He offered me $92,000 to walk away. Oh, child. He came back last night by phone. He told me my landlord had changed the locks on my apartment in Tacoma. He told me I had no home to go back to. He told me to take the money. And you said? I said no. Beatrix looked at her a long time. Then she reached across the table, took Elspeth's hand in both of her own. Her hands were small and dry and warm. Your great-uncle, she said, has spent 30 years preparing for this exact day. He has been waiting for you. He has been waiting to give you the truth he could not give anyone else. There is something in that house, child, something that will frighten you, and something that will set you free. What is it? I don't know. You don't know. He never told me. He said in his last letter, Beatrix, when she comes, tell her to look for the eagle. Tell her the eagle sleeps under the iron. Elspeth froze. The eagle sleeps under the iron. Yes, that's in his journals. I've been reading them. He wrote it over and over. Then you have your map, Beatrix said. Now you must read it. She squeezed Elspeth's hand. And child, you are not alone here. Do you understand me? You are not alone. There are people in this town, old people, people who knew your great uncle, people he trusted. We have been waiting for you too. Elspeth could not speak. She nodded. Beatrix released her hand, stood, walked to the back wall of the kitchen, opened a drawer, pulled out a small brass key on a leather cord, came back, pressed it into Elspeth's palm. What's this? The locked door at the end of the first-floor hall. He gave this to you. He gave it to me 12 years ago. He said, if she comes, give it to her. If she does not come, bury it with me. Elspeth closed her hand around the key. Cold metal, a weight that felt heavier than a key should. There's one more thing, Beatrix said. What? You will meet a sheriff in this town. His name is Augustus Penn. He is a stern man. He will not seem friendly. He may seem like a man you cannot trust. All right, trust him. What? Trust him, child, with your life. Trust him. Why? Because your great-uncle did. She paid for Linus's books at the front counter. Beatrix would not take her money. Elspeth tried. The old woman closed her hand and shook her head. Come back tomorrow, she said. Come back when you have read. The bell above the door jingled as Elspeth stepped out into the cold. She drove 3 doors down to the general store. Easton's, since 1962. Inside it smelled of coffee and motor oil. A man stood behind the counter, 60 maybe, gray beard, suspenders, a flannel shirt rolled up at the elbows. He had hands like worn leather. He had eyes that took everything in and gave nothing back. Morning, morning. You're the Pembroke girl. She paused. How does everybody in this town know who I am? He shrugged. Small town, new car, old plates. You did the math wrong if you thought you were anonymous. She almost smiled. She didn't quite. I need supplies. Make a list. She did. Canned soup, bread, eggs, milk, children's cough medicine, batteries, a flashlight that worked, a second flashlight that also worked, matches, lamp oil, a box of long, sturdy candles, rope. The man read the list, looked up. Rope, he said, rope. You plan on hanging anybody. I plan on being prepared, he grunted. You're up at the old Pembroke place. Yes, you're alone. I have my brother. He looked past her shoulder. Linus was investigating a display of penny candy. The man's stoned face softened a hair. He need any of that? He needs all of it. I'm not buying it. The man reached under the counter, came up with a small paper bag, filled it, 3 different candies, closed it with a twist of the top, handed it across the counter. On the house. Sir, I don't take. Wasn't an offer to you, was an offer to him. She closed her mouth. Thank you. Name's Rufus, he said. Rufus Easton. I serviced that Honda of yours 2 years before you ever owned it. Used to belong to a teacher in Helena. Good car, bad belts. You want me to look at it before you head back up the pass? You bring it round. I can't afford. Did I say I was charging you? She closed her mouth again. He started bagging her groceries. That mountain, he said. She don't play fair this time of year. Roads ice over at sundown. CB radio in the diner works better than any cell phone you got. Anybody comes looking for you up there. Anybody you don't know. You drive down. You come here. You don't try to be brave. Brave gets people dead. She watched him bag her supplies. Mr. Easton, Rufus. Why are you helping me? He paused, set down the can he was holding, looked her in the eye. Because your great uncle helped me bury my wife 8 years ago, paid for the headstone, did it anonymous. I only found out 'cause the stonemason got drunk at the diner and let it slip. Cornelius never asked for thanks, never came to the funeral, just sent a check, quietly, like he did everything. He went back to bagging, so when his niece walks into my store, I help. Elspeth could not speak. She paid for her groceries. She loaded them into the car. She bundled Linus into the passenger seat with the bag of penny candy. She drove 1 block down the main street and pulled over by the library and sat with both hands on the wheel. She breathed, in, out, in, out. She thought he was here all the time. She thought he was here all the time, paying, watching. She wiped her face hard with the back of her hand. Then she went into the library. The library was a single room above the post office, a narrow staircase, wood floors, tall windows looking out at the snow, a fireplace at one end, long oak tables, the smell of beeswax. A young woman sat behind the desk. She was perhaps 25, black hair in a long braid, a green sweater, reading glasses pushed up into her hair. She was bent over a stack of papers with a yellow highlighter. Hi, she looked up. Hi, welcome to the Glenmore Library. We have 11,000 books. None of them are new. Can I help you? I need Russian history. The woman's eyes lit up. It was the lighting up of a person who has been waiting 6 years for someone to ask the right question. Oh, she said. Oh my God. Russian what? Romanov's imperial period, the revolution, anything about Fabergé, anything about eagles. She stood, pushed back her chair, came around the desk, held out a hand. Adelina Quintrell, I am the entire staff of this library. I have a master's in art history that nobody in this town has ever needed. You are now my favorite person. Elspeth shook her hand. Elspeth? Oh, I know. Of course you do. Small town, so I hear. Adelina laughed. She turned, walked between the stacks, pulled 4 books off shelves without looking at them, brought them back, set them down, patted the top one. Romanov, Fall of the Lost Treasures of the Imperial Family. I read this one twice in high school. There's a chapter on the eggs. There were 50 imperial Easter eggs. 8 of them are unaccounted for, lost in the chaos of 1917. People have been hunting them for 100 years. A grocery store scrap dealer in the Midwest found one in 2004 and didn't know what it was. The estimated value was $33 million. He almost melted it down for the gold. Elspeth stared at her. 33 million for one of the smaller ones. The smaller ones. Yes. She breathed. She did not. She did not breathe. Adelina. Yes. If someone found one, today, a Fabergé egg, the kind nobody knew was real anymore. A presumed destroyed egg. Yes, Adelina's face went serious. It would be the discovery of the century. It would shake the auction world. It would be valued. Honestly, I don't know. The Rothschild egg sold for $18.5 million in 2007. A presumed destroyed imperial egg with documented provenance, restored to the historical record. I would not be surprised by 9 figures. 9 figures. 100 million plus. The room went very quiet. Elspeth sat down hard in the nearest chair. Adelina watched her. Elspeth, I'm fine. You don't look fine. I'm fine. You are the opposite of fine. I'm fine, Adelina. I'm fine. Can I borrow these? You can have them. I can't take. They're library books. You're not taking them. You're borrowing them. You bring them back. That's the system. Right, right. Elspeth stood, picked up the books, held them against her chest, looked at the young librarian. Why is everybody in this town being so kind to me? Adelina hesitated. Because some of us know who your uncle was, and some of us know what he did for this town, and some of us have been waiting a very long time for a girl with his eyes to walk into our library and ask the right question. Elspeth's throat went tight. Thank you. Come back tomorrow. I will. She did not see Sheriff Augustus Penn that day. She drove the 40 miles back to the cabin in a long, heavy silence. Linus chewed his candy. The afternoon light went gold. The shadows of the pines stretched long across the road. By the time she pulled up to the porch, the sun was bleeding red behind the western ridges. She unloaded the groceries, lit the wood stove, made macaroni for Linus from a box, watched him eat it with the gravity of a small boy who had had a long day, tucked him under the quilt, read him 3 pages of a chapter book about a boy who lived in the walls of a house. He fell asleep before she finished the page. She covered him. She kissed his forehead. She got to work. She read journals until midnight. She sat at her great-uncle's roll-top desk in the upstairs study with 3 lamps burning and a stack of leather-bound ledgers and a stack of library books and a pencil and a notebook of her own. She read his frantic handwriting. She made notes. She drew diagrams. The eagle sleeps under the iron. The eagle sleeps under the iron. The eagle sleeps under the iron. It was everywhere, underlined, boxed, starred, sometimes written so hard the pen had cut through the page. She thought of the wood stove downstairs, the massive cast iron wood stove, bolted to a slab of slate. The slate was raised. There was something underneath. There had to be. It was past midnight when she went down. She brought a flashlight, a crowbar from the woodshed, a hammer, a claw. She had Googled how to lift floor slabs and had immediately lost cell service. She moved Linus carefully to the floral sofa and pushed it across the room so it was nowhere near the stove. She let the fire die down to embers. She let the stove cool. She waited an hour sitting on the floor, hugging her knees, watching her brother sleep. Then she went to work. She wedged the crowbar under the edge of the slate slab. She leaned. Nothing. She leaned harder. The slate creaked. She leaned with her whole body. The slate shifted. She wedged the second crowbar in. Pried again. Sweat rolled down her back even in the cold room. Her shoulders burned. Her hands cramped. She bit down on a curse and kept going. The slate slid sideways with a scrape that filled the whole house. Underneath was a heavy iron trapdoor, flush with the floorboards. A thick rusted iron ring set into the center. Her heart was a fist in her chest. She knelt, gripped the ring, pulled. The trapdoor groaned. Hinges screamed. A blast of cold, dry air rushed up out of the dark beneath. The air smelled of paper, oil, stone. She aimed the flashlight down. A flight of concrete steps, steep, narrow, disappearing into black. Elspeth Kavanaugh, 19 years old in wool socks, and her mother's old sweatshirt stood at the edge of the open trapdoor in a freezing dead man's house at 1 a.m. and stared down into the dark. She thought of Linus on the couch. She thought of Beatrix. She thought of Rufus Easton with his bag of candy. She thought of her mother's voice. You are what you do next. She went down. The stairs ended at a small concrete room, 8 feet by 8 feet, low ceiling, cold floor. A bare bulb dangled from a wire overhead. She tried the switch. Nothing. The bulb was dead. The generator was dead. The whole hidden sub-basement was dark except for her flashlight. In the center of the room was an oak table. On the oak table sat a single envelope and nothing else. She stared at it. She had expected the bank vault, the treasure, the room full of crates and gold and glittering imperial eagles. She had expected the answer. Tonight, now, she had not expected an empty room. She had not expected a letter on a table. Her stomach dropped. She picked up the envelope. Heavy paper, cream-colored, sealed with red wax. On the front, in the careful blue handwriting she had now memorized, were 3 words: "For my heir." Her hands shook. She broke the seal. The letter was 3 pages long. She read it standing in a freezing concrete room 90 feet below the floorboards of a frozen forest house. My dear child, if you have found this room, you have already done more than I dared hope. You have come. You have not sold. You have not run. You have looked. This is not the vault. This is the test. The thing you seek lies behind a second wall, a wall you cannot see from where you stand. You will know which wall it is when you have done 2 things. First, you must understand that what is hidden in this house does not belong to me. It does not belong to you. It belongs to a story older than both of us, a story I will explain when you have earned the second door. Second, the combination is not what you think. You will be tempted to use the dates of the Russian imperial family. You will try the abdication, the execution, the October Revolution. You will try every public date you can find in the journals upstairs. None of those will work. Those are the dates of strangers. The combination is the birthday of a child, a boy who lived 6 years, a boy who liked dinosaurs, a boy I could not save. If you do not know his name, ask Beatrix. She knows. She has always known. I am sorry, child. I am so deeply sorry that the price of your inheritance is the knowledge of my failure. I am sorry I never met you. I am sorry I watched you from too far away. I am sorry that the worst thing in my life is the door I am asking you to open. But you must open it, because what is behind it does not belong to the men who killed him. It belongs to the world, and the world has been waiting 100 years. Go upstairs. Go to bed. Hold your brother. Go see Beatrix in the morning, and then come back. With all my love and all my regret, Cornelius. She read the letter twice. She read it 3 times. She sat down on the cold floor of the concrete room and she cried. Not pretty crying, not movie crying, the wet, ugly choke crying of a person who has been carrying too much for too long and has finally been given permission by a dead man to put it down. When she was done, she folded the letter. She put it in her pocket. She stood up. She went back up the stairs. She closed the trapdoor. She did not put the slate back. She was too tired. She added a log to the wood stove. She lay down beside her sleeping brother on the floral couch. She pulled the quilt over them both. Florian, she thought. Florian, a boy who liked dinosaurs. She fell asleep. She did not stay asleep. She woke at 4:12 in the morning to the sound of breaking glass. She froze. For one long, horrible second, she thought she had dreamed it. Then she heard the second sound. Boots on the porch. 2 sets. A male voice. Low, hard. She's in there. Another voice. Smaller, meaner. Kid too. Kid too. Elspeth's hand closed over Linus's mouth before he could make a sound. He opened his eyes. She put a finger to her lips. He nodded. He understood. He had been 7 years old for a long time. He understood quiet. She moved. She moved like a person whose body had already decided what to do before her brain caught up. She rolled off the couch. She pulled Linus with her. She crouched behind the sofa. She listened. Footsteps in the front hall, a second set in the kitchen, a third voice now, outside, on the porch, familiar, smooth, slimy. Bring her out alive. Crane wants to talk to her. Roderick. He was outside. He had brought men. Elspeth's breath was a saw in her chest. She thought of the iron poker by the door. She thought of the bear spray Rufus had given her with a wink in the kitchen cupboard. She thought of the trap door, open, behind the wood stove, a black mouth in the floor. She made the calculation in 3 seconds. She picked up Linus. She crawled. She moved on hands and knees behind the line of the sofa. She slid him into her arms. She made it to the corner of the room, the grandfather clock. The grandfather clock in the corner with the cabinet base. The base was hollow. Linus had crawled into it that first morning to see if there was a secret passage. He had fit, easily. She opened the cabinet. She pressed him in. She pressed her finger to her lips one more time. She whispered, "Don't make a sound, Bug. Don't make a sound. I love you. Don't make a sound." She closed the cabinet. She turned. She made it 3 steps toward the kitchen before the man came around the corner. He was huge, 6'5", a black coat, a wool cap, a small black handgun. He saw her. He raised the gun. Elspeth did the only thing she could do. She dropped. She rolled. She came up on the other side of the sofa. She bolted for the trap door, the black mouth in the floor, the basement Roderick Crane did not know about. She made it to the edge. She heard the man behind her shout. She heard a second man come pounding down the stairs from the second floor. She heard the front door bang open. She heard Roderick's voice, sharp now, angry. "Where is she?" She jumped. She fell 6 feet into the dark. She landed on her side on concrete. Pain lanced up her ribs. She bit through her lip not to scream. Above her footsteps thundered across the floorboards. Below her the dark. The trapdoor was still open. She could not reach it from down here. She could not close it. She could only hide. She crab-walked back into the small concrete room, pressed herself into the corner farthest from the stairs, killed her flashlight, held her breath. She heard the men above. She heard them stop. She heard one of them say, "There's a hole in the floor." A long silence, a creak, a man's boot. On the top step, he was coming down. Elspeth closed her eyes. And then, above, outside, from very far away, through the boarded windows of the cabin, a sound, a siren, a single far siren cutting through the snow. The boots on the steps stopped. The man swore, Roderick's voice, cold, furious, above. "Out, out, out, now!" The boots reversed, up the stairs, across the floor, across the porch, boots crunching across snow, an engine starting somewhere down the long, unplowed driveway, tires spinning, the engine fading. Elspeth did not move for 2 full minutes. Then she did. She crawled up the concrete stairs on hands and knees. She came up into the living room. She did not stand. She moved on her elbows. She made her way across the floor. She reached the grandfather clock. She opened the cabinet. Linus was inside. He was alive. He was crying without sound. She pulled him out. She held him so tight she thought she might break him. She rocked him. She whispered into his hair. She did not know what she was whispering. The siren was closer now. A vehicle pulled up outside. A heavy engine. The slam of a truck door. Boots on the porch. A hard fist on the door. "Kavanaugh, sheriff, open up." Elspeth did not move. Beatrix's voice in her head. Trust him, child, with your life. Trust him. She set Linus down. She walked to the door. She unlocked it. She opened it. The man on the porch was tall, 60 maybe, iron gray hair, a long lined face, a heavy brown coat with a brass star on the chest, eyes like a winter sky, hands the size of dinner plates. He looked at her. He saw the blood on her lip, the shaking, the brother behind her in his pajamas. He saw all of it in one slow, careful look. He did not say anything kind. He did not say anything soft. He said only, "You're safe now." And then he said, "My name is Augustus Penn. Your uncle hired me to look after you 6 years ago. I have been waiting in this town for the day I would have to come up this hill. I am sorry I did not come sooner. I am sorry I waited for the signal. Cornelius told me to wait. He said you would have to choose to stay. He said if I came too early, I would scare you off. He was a stubborn old man, and he was right." Elspeth stared at him. 6 years, 6 years. You watched me from a distance. You watched my brother from a distance. Her knees gave. He caught her by the elbow. He was steady. He smelled of pipe tobacco and old leather. He held her up like she weighed nothing. "Come on," he said. "Pack what you can. You and the boy come to my place tonight. You sleep tonight. You eat tonight. Tomorrow at first light we come back. We open whatever your uncle has been hiding in this house. We end this. Together." She looked up at him. She did not have words. She nodded. He nodded back. Outside, the snow was beginning to slow. A thin gray light was crawling up over the ridges in the east. The longest night of her life was almost over. The hardest day of her life had not begun. Augustus Penn lived in a low log house on the edge of Glen Moor. A wide porch, a coon dog asleep on it, smoke from a stone chimney, a pot of stew on a back burner, a spare room with 2 beds already made up with quilts, as if he had been waiting 6 years for someone to need them, because he had been. He fed them. He did not ask questions. He sat at the head of his kitchen table and watched Linus eat 2 bowls of stew. He watched Elspeth eat 1. He poured her coffee that was too strong. She drank it anyway. Linus fell asleep at the table. Penn carried him to the spare room like a man carrying a sleeping fawn. He laid him down. He pulled the quilt up. He turned off the lamp. He came back to the kitchen. He sat across from Elspeth. He poured himself a coffee. He said, "Ask me what you need to ask me." She looked at him. She did not know where to start. So she said, "Why?" He understood. "Your great-uncle wrote me a letter 6 years ago, from this town, from a P.O. box. He said he was an old man. He said he had a niece in Tacoma. He said he had a great niece. He said one day the wrong people might find her. He said when that day came, he wanted someone in this town to be ready. He said he had picked me because I had retired from Chicago police homicide and moved here for the quiet. He said he had read about a case I worked. He said he believed I was honest. He paid you." "He paid me. I gave most of it back. I kept enough to cover gas, to drive past your elementary school once a year when I went to a conference in Seattle. I kept enough to cover the cost of a phone subscription to your local paper. I read your name in the honor roll listings, child. I read your name. I watched you grow up on paper from 2,000 miles away." Elspeth set down her cup. She could not speak. He took a slow breath. "I never met him in person," Penn said. "We wrote letters. He sent them through Beatrix. She brought them to my house. I sent mine back the same way. He was a careful man. He was a kind man. He was a man who never, in any letter he ever wrote me, asked me to do anything for him. He only asked me to do things for you." "What did he ask?" He asked me to be there when you came. He asked me to wait. He said you were stubborn. He said you would have to choose to stay. He said if I came up that hill before you were ready, I would scare you off. So I waited. I drove past the property twice a week. I watched the road. I knew Crane was sniffing around the probate filings. I knew it was coming. And tonight, when I heard the truck on Old Mill Road, I broke every speed law on the books to get up there. How did you know? Game cameras. Your great-uncle put them all up that road 11 years ago. Motion triggered. They sent to my phone. They went off at 3:50 this morning. Elspeth stared at him. He was watching the road. He was watching everything. She put her face in her hands. He loved us so much, she whispered. He loved you so much, Penn said, and he did not know how to show it from so far. So he built a system. He built a system to keep you safe even when he could not be there. She lowered her hands. She looked up at him. Sheriff Penn, Augustus, Augustus, there's a vault under that house. I know, you know. I helped him pour the concrete in 2003. She blinked. You helped him. He brought in a crew from Bozeman for the steel. But yes, I helped with the back end. I never asked what went inside. He never told me. He said the day I knew was the day someone he loved was finally there to open it. She let out a sound, half a laugh, half a sob. Augustus. Yes. His son's name was Florian. He was 6. I know. The combination is the boy's birthday. I know. Beatrix told you. She called me 2 hours ago. A small silence. A clock ticking on his kitchen wall. A log shifting in the stove. Augustus. Yes. Will you come with me tomorrow morning to open it? Child. There is no place else in this world I am going to be. They left at first light. Linus rode in the back of Penn's truck, bundled in a wool blanket, holding the small brown paper bag of Rufus Easton's penny candy in his lap. He had asked twice if they were going home. Elspeth had told him twice that they were going to finish what their uncle had started. Beatrix met them at the cabin. She was already there, standing on the porch in her long blue coat with a thermos of coffee and a tin of shortbread. She had walked up the driveway behind Penn's truck. She had let herself in with the spare key Cornelius had left with her 12 years ago. She put a hand on Elspeth's cheek. How did you sleep, child? I didn't. I didn't think so. She turned. She led them inside. Penn went first into the living room. He moved like a man who had been there before, because he had. He inspected the trap door. He nodded. It's clean, he said. They didn't come down. How can you tell? No tracks in the dust on the steps. He went down. He came back up with a battery lantern. He brought it from his truck. He hung it on a nail set in the concrete wall of the test room. The bare bulb above flickered to life from the lantern's reflective hood. The small concrete room filled with yellow light. He turned to Elspeth. You ready? She nodded. He gestured at the far wall, where Cornelius's letter had said behind a second wall. There were only 3 walls in the small concrete room that were not the staircase. Elspeth walked the perimeter, her fingers trailing the cold concrete. She tapped. She listened. The walls were solid, 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 until the 3rd wall, the one with a tall, narrow bookshelf bolted to it, a bookshelf full of innocuous volumes, engineering manuals, a set of encyclopedias from 1974, a book on bird migrations of the western mountains. She tapped behind the bookshelf. It rang hollow. There. Penn was already moving. He pulled the bookshelf away from the wall with a grunt. It was on hidden casters. It rolled smoothly. It swung out on a hinge she could not see. And behind it, a vault door, a massive circular die-bolt vault door, brushed steel, brass dial, a spoked handle, the kind of door she had only ever seen in old movies, set flush into the wall as if the mountain itself had grown around it. Beatrix gasped. Penn did not. He stood with both hands on his hips and he stared at it for a long second. "My God," he said. "How?" Elspeth whispered. "How did he get this down here?" "He had it lowered through the trapdoor in pieces in 2003 by a single welder from Boise who signed a non-disclosure agreement and was dead of natural causes by 2005. Augustus. Child, you're scaring me. Good." She approached the dial. She put a hand on it. The metal was cold. She closed her eyes. She thought of a boy who liked dinosaurs, a boy who made pancakes with his mother on Saturdays, a boy who had a stuffed rabbit named Mr. Biscuit, a boy who had died at 6 years old in a fire that was not a fire. She did not know his birthday. She turned. "Beatrix!" The old woman was already pulling the small notebook from her coat pocket. She opened it. She read aloud. "Florian Edward Pembroke, born March the 22nd, 1987. Elspeth turned back to the dial. She turned it right. To 22. She turned it left. To 3. She turned it right. To 19. She turned it left. To 87. A long, slow pause. Then a click. A heavy, deep, internal click. The kind of sound a mountain makes when it remembers a secret it has been keeping for a long time. Elspeth grabbed the spoked handle. She pulled. The vault door swung open. It was perfectly balanced. It swung silently, as if it had been waiting all these years to be opened by exactly her. Cold, dry air rolled out. She raised her flashlight. Beatrix made a sound behind her, a small, surprised, almost reverent sound. Penn whistled. Once, lo, the vault was a long, narrow room. Steel shelves, glass cases, wooden crates stenciled with faded Cyrillic letters, and the double-headed eagle of the Russian imperial house. Hundreds of leather portfolios stacked in careful rows, the smell of paper and oilcloth and time. At the far end of the room, on a black velvet plinth, behind a small glass case, sat the most beautiful object Elspeth Kavanagh had ever seen in her life. It was perhaps the size of a grapefruit. It was made of platinum and deep blue enamel. It was studded with hundreds of tiny diamonds set into the pattern of constellations, real constellations, Orion, the Pleiades, Cassiopeia, each one rendered in flawless cut stones. The Milky Way ran in a band of seed pearls. The base was a globe of lapis lazuli. The top was crowned with a single trembling diamond the size of a robin's egg. It glowed in the dark of a concrete vault, 90 feet below a frozen forest house, with no light source on it, but the trembling beam of her phone flashlight. The egg seemed to generate its own quiet light, as if it remembered the chandeliers it had once sat under. Elspeth could not speak. Beatrix had her hand over her mouth. Penn had taken off his hat. Beside the egg, on the same velvet plinth, sat a thick folder, cream paper, a red wax seal. On the front, in the careful blue handwriting Elspeth had come to know like a voice for the air, "Read first." She took the folder. She did not touch the egg. She walked back out of the vault. She climbed the concrete stairs. She sat down on the floral sofa upstairs with Linus pressed against her side. She broke the seal. She read, "My dear child, the thing you are looking at does not belong to me. It does not belong to you. I want this to be the first thing you know. It belongs to a family that is gone. It belongs to a story that the men who burned my wife and my son have spent 30 years trying to keep buried. I am going to tell you that story now, because once you know it, you will understand what you have to do. In 1917, the Russian Empire fell. The Romanovs were murdered. Their treasures were scattered. Some were sold, some were melted, some were lost in the chaos and have never been found. This egg is one of those. It was made by Carl Fabergé for the Empress Alexandra in 1914. It was a gift to her son Alexei. It was never publicly displayed. It was never recorded in the official imperial inventory. It was the Empress's private thing, a mother's gift to a sick boy. When the Empress saw the revolution coming, when she understood her family would not survive it, she gave the egg to a friend, a young Russian noblewoman named Yelena Veshniak, a girl of 19 with a French passport and a way out. The Empress told her, "Take this, take it out, sell it only to feed yourselves. If a Romanov heir survives, return it. If no Romanov heir survives, give it to a museum so that the world will remember that my son was loved." Yelena Veshniak got out. She lived the rest of her life in Paris. She married a man named Pyotr Veshniak. They had 2 children. They did not sell the egg. They could not bring themselves to. It sat in a velvet box in a safe in their apartment for 40 years. In 1924, they deposited it for safekeeping in the vault of Carringford Trust Bank in London. In 1989, the last Veshniak descendant died, a grandson. He had no children. He had no heirs. He had no will. The egg sat in the vault, unclaimed, for 2 years. And then in 1991, a man named Edmund Crane, the director of special accounts at Carringford Trust Bank, made a quiet internal decision. He decided that as the depositing family had no surviving heirs, the egg would pass into the bank's private holdings. He did not file the paperwork. He did not inform the trustees. He did not contact the Veshniak estate executors in Paris. He simply moved the egg into a different vault, a vault that did not officially exist, a vault he and 3 other senior directors used to consolidate orphaned assets that they intended to liquidate quietly through private brokers. I am the man who discovered this. I was the senior archivist. I was the man who tracked every box. I noticed the move. I asked Edmund Crane about it. He smiled. He said he would explain. He said he would investigate. That was in late 1992. In February of 1993, my wife and son were burned alive. I knew the day I came home and saw the ruin of my own front door. I went to the police. They listened. They did nothing. I was visited by men in suits who told me to consider a sabbatical. I understood the message. I had a choice. I could die in a tidy fire, or I could disappear. I disappeared. I took the egg with me. I will admit this to you, child. I want you to know it from me and not from any other man. I stole it. I stole it from a bank that had already stolen it. I stole it from a thief in a suit who had murdered my family to keep me quiet. I stole it because I believed, and I still believe, that somewhere in this world a story was owed. I have kept it for 30 years. I have not sold it. I have not shown it. I have not breathed a word of it to anyone. I have only waited. I waited for the men who killed my family to die. Edmund Crane died in 2007. He outlived me in everything except guilt. I waited for the statute of limitations on a 1991 international theft. It expired in 2021. I waited for a person of mine, a person of my blood, a person I could trust to do this right. I waited for you, child, because the egg cannot stay buried, because the world has been told for 100 years that the constellation egg was destroyed in the revolution. The world is wrong. The world deserves to be right. The boy it was made for deserves to be remembered. The empress who gave it away deserves to be remembered. The girl who carried it out of fire deserves to be remembered. And my son Florian, who I could not save, deserves to be remembered too. Here is what I am asking you to do. You will be tempted to sell this thing privately. Do not. The men who hunted me will still want it buried. The buyer who pays the most will be the buyer who wants no one to ever see it again. Do not feed that buyer. Sell it at public auction, through the most reputable house you can find. Sell it to a museum. Sell it to a buyer who will display it. Sell it to the light. Take the money. Pay the lien. Buy a home for yourself and your brother. Live the life I was never able to live with my own family. And with what is left, do good. Find the descendants of Imogene. There is a niece. Her name is in the second folder. Tell her what happened to her aunt. Give her what she needs, if you wish. Make a foundation. Make it in the name of a boy. Make sure other children whose mothers have died know they are not alone in the world. I am sorry, child. I am so sorry that the price of your inheritance is the weight of all this knowing. But you are not alone now. You have Beatrix, you have Augustus, you have Rufus and Adelina and a whole town that has been waiting for you. And somewhere, in whatever comes after this, you have me. With all my love, Cornelius. Elspeth folded the letter. She did not cry. She had cried in the basement the night before. She had cried in a bathroom in Tacoma. She had cried in a kitchen in Beatrix's bookshop. She did not have the crying left. She felt instead a thing that had been settling into her for 2 days, like a stone settling at the bottom of a clear pool. She felt steady. She looked up at Penn. She looked at Beatrix. She said, "Call the FBI." Penn was already nodding. "I have a friend in the Helena field office," he said. 22-year veteran, honest as a hammer. I can have her on the phone in 3 minutes. Do it. He stood. He walked outside to where the cell signal was better. He pulled a small satellite phone from his coat pocket. He started dialing. Beatrix sat beside Elspeth on the couch. She took her hand. "Child." "Yes. You are doing exactly the right thing." Elspeth nodded. She did not feel right. She did not feel wrong. She felt only that she was finally doing what she had been brought to this house to do. Roderick Crane did not let her finish. Roderick Crane came at noon. He came in a black SUV with 3 men. 2 of them had been in the cabin the night before. The third was a thin, pale man with a face like a knife. They came up the unplowed driveway in 2 vehicles, engines roaring, snow flying. Penn saw them coming through the kitchen window. He turned to Elspeth. "Get the boy." She got the boy. He turned to Beatrix. "In the cellar." Beatrix did not argue. "Where are you going to be?" "On the porch." "You can't fight 4 men, Augustus." "I'm not going to fight 4 men. I'm going to delay 4 men. The FBI is 40 minutes out. I need 10. He drew a sidearm from a holster Elspeth had not even noticed under his coat. He checked the chamber. He walked to the front door. He turned back at the threshold. "Kavanaugh." "Yes." "In the kitchen cupboard." There's a can of bear spray your friend Rufus had me put there last night. Industrial grade, full canister. Use it like you mean it." "I will. Don't aim for the eyes." "What?" "Aim for the upper chest. The cloud rises. It catches the eyes and the nose at the same time. It puts a man down in 2 seconds. Aim for the chest." She stared at him. "Augustus." "Yes. Thank you." "Not yet, child. Thank me later." He went out. She got the bear spray. Linus was in the basement with Beatrix. The trapdoor was closed. The slate was pushed back over it. The grandfather clock was pulled across the floor to cover the seam. He was hidden. He was safe. He was as safe as Elspeth could make him. She stood in the kitchen with the canister in her hand. She heard Pen on the porch. "Far enough. Right there. Hands where I can see them." Roderick's voice, smooth, furious. "Sheriff, out of your jurisdiction. We have a civil matter with the property owner. You have a felony breaking and entering from last night, and you have a federal task force from Helena 30 miles down this road. Turn around. You won't shoot me, Augustus. Try me." A long pause, a click of a hammer being drawn back. Not Pen's. Roderick had a gun. Elspeth's heart stopped. She moved. She went out the back door, around the side of the house, through the snow, through the cold, the bear spray heavy in her right hand, Pen's voice growing in her left ear. She came around the porch corner. Pen was on the front step, sidearm raised, aimed at Roderick. Roderick was 10 feet away, a sleek black pistol pointed at Pen's chest. The other 3 men stood behind Roderick. 2 more guns. The thin, pale one had a tactical knife. Pen was outnumbered 4-1. He was about to die for her. Elspeth raised the canister. She did not aim for the eyes. She aimed for the upper chest. She pulled the trigger. A roaring orange cloud blasted out across the porch, a wall of liquid fire. It caught the thin, pale knife man in the chest first. He shrieked, dropped. The second man caught the edge of it, stumbled backward. The third man tried to spin away. Pen moved. Pen moved like the homicide detective he had been. He fired 1 shot. The gun in Roderick's hand went flying off the porch. Roderick screamed and grabbed his wrist, blood between his fingers. Pen fired again. The third man went down clutching his thigh. Pen was on top of the second man with the butt of his pistol before the man could raise his weapon. In 30 seconds, 3 of them were on the porch in the snow. Cuffed with zip ties, Pen pulled from his coat pocket like a magician pulling scarves. Only Roderick was still standing, bleeding wrist, eyes streaming from the bear spray. He looked at Elspeth. His face was something not human. He came for her. Pen was on the far end of the porch with a man twice his weight. He could not turn fast enough. Roderick was on her in 2 long strides. He hit her. He hit her in the face with his good hand. She went down hard in the snow. The world snapped sideways. She tasted iron in her mouth. His hands around her throat. She was on her back in the snow. He was on top of her, his fingers in her windpipe, his face above her, twisted, bloody, lips peeled back. "Did he tell you?" he hissed. "Did he tell you what your uncle did? Did he tell you what your uncle stole from my family?" She could not breathe. She tried to kick, tried to claw. He was too heavy, too strong. "My grandfather built that bank, you little..." She saw spots. "Your grandfather," she choked, "killed a child." His grip tightened. "My grandfather did what he had to." Her vision tunneled. She thought Linus. She thought Linus is in the basement. Linus is in the basement. Linus is safe. And then she heard the front door of the cabin slam open. She heard small bare feet on the porch boards. She heard a small voice, furious, tiny. 7 years old. Get off my sister. She heard the swing. She heard the impact. A heavy brass oil lamp. The one from the front hall. Cornelius's lamp. A boy, 7 years old, in his pajamas, barefoot in the snow, standing over a grown man with both hands on the lamp's heavy brass base, the way a baseball player holds a bat. He had brought it down on Roderick Crane's skull. Roderick rolled off her. He hit the porch boards with the soft sound of meat hitting stone. He did not move. Linus did not move either. He stood holding the lamp, his eyes wide, tears frozen on his cheeks, his feet bare and red in the snow. Elspeth gasped for air. She rolled. She crawled. She made it to her knees. She reached for him. He dropped the lamp. He fell into her arms. She held him. She held him. She held him. She did not let go for a long time. The FBI arrived 11 minutes later. 2 black SUVs, 6 agents. A team in blue jackets who took the men away and bagged the weapons and asked Elspeth questions she could barely answer. A medic who cleaned the cut inside her lip and pronounced her concussion-free. A different medic who wrapped Linus's bare feet in a thermal blanket and called him a brave young man. The lead agent was a woman in her 50s, sharp eyes, short gray hair. She looked at Penn. Augustus. Karen, you've been busy. I have. Glad you came when you did. You promised me 20 minutes. I gave you 40. It was 11. 11. 11. She blew out a breath. She looked at Elspeth. She looked at the cabin. She looked at the 4 men being walked to the second SUV. Miss Kavanaugh, yes. I understand you have something to show us. Elspeth nodded. She walked them down into the trapdoor, down the concrete stairs, behind the bookshelf, into the vault. The agent stopped at the door. She did not move for a full minute. Then she said very softly, "My God, 6 months pass. 6 months." The FBI investigation was open, then expanded, then handed up to a federal task force that included 2 officers from the Cultural Property Crime Division. They confirmed everything. The provenance documents in Cornelius's second folder were impeccable. He had documented every step of the Veshniak family's ownership, every transfer, every bank receipt. He had even tracked down a distant cousin of the Veshniaks alive in Paris, 81 years old, who confirmed in a sworn statement that her grandfather had told her as a child about a magnificent egg in a London bank that no one was allowed to talk about. Roderick Crane was charged with 5 felonies, including attempted murder, including conspiracy to commit murder in the deaths of Imogene and Florian Pembroke in 1993. The case in London was reopened. Edmund Crane was named posthumously. 3 other living former Carringford executives were named in the indictment. The egg was authenticated by the Hawthorne Riley auction house in New York by a panel of 7 experts, including a quiet elderly man named Dr. Ansel Marchetti, who set down his jeweler's loupe at the end of his examination and looked at Elspeth across the table with shining eyes and said, "Child, I have spent 50 years of my life waiting to see this. Thank you." It went to auction on a Wednesday in June. Elspeth wore a black dress she had bought for $90. She held Linus's hand. He wore a small navy suit he had picked out himself. Beatrix sat on her right. Penn sat behind her in the row. Adelina Quintrell had flown in from Helena and was twitching with excitement. Rufus Easton had refused to come and had instead sent a card with a single line on it. "Make him proud, kiddo." The bidding opened at $60 million. It closed 41 minutes later at $158 million. The winning bidder was a private museum in Geneva. a foundation. The terms of purchase included a permanent public exhibition, free admission for children, a traveling loan program. The egg would not be hidden again, not ever again. When the gavel fell, Elspeth did not cheer. She closed her eyes. She thought of an old man in a frozen forest house, writing letters in blue ink, watching the road through a phone full of game cameras, loving a girl he had never met from a long way off. She thought, "I did it, Uncle. I did it." 2 years later, she stood on a balcony, the balcony of a small house overlooking the Oregon coast. The Pacific was gray and silver in the morning light. A line of pelicans was working the swell. The wind smelled of salt and pine. Linus was on the beach below, barefoot, 9 years old now, tall for his age, brown from a summer of sun. He was building something out of driftwood with a school friend. He was laughing. He was by every measure of the word healthy. He was by every measure of the word a happy child. He had a therapist who specialized in childhood trauma. He had a tutor in math because he had decided at 8 years old that he wanted to be an astronomer. He had his own room with stars on the ceiling. He had a dog, a spaniel mix named Bandit, who slept at the foot of his bed every night and looked at Elspeth like she had personally hung the moon. She watched him. She had cried for a year after the auction. She had cried in therapy. She had cried in bed. She had cried in a kitchen in Glenmore when Beatrix Yarrow held her hand across a small wooden table and said, "Child, child, child." She had cried until there was no more crying left, until what came out instead was something quieter, something that looked from the outside almost like peace. She had re-enrolled at the University of Washington. She was studying art history. She had a particular interest in lost objects. In the foyer of her small Oregon house was a framed photograph, black and white, Cornelius Pembroke at 50, Imogene at his side, Florian on his shoulders, laughing. The photograph she had taken from the mantel of a frozen forest cabin on her second night in Montana. It was the only thing in the house that had been in the cabin. She had donated everything else to the National Wildlife Conservation Trust. The cabin, the 40 acres, the books, the journals, the Cyrillic crates of imperial bonds which international collectors had quietly purchased back at full face value to keep them out of certain other hands. All of it, given to the wild forever. She kept only the letters her great-uncle had written her, and one other thing, a small enamel pin, a double-headed eagle, a copy, a souvenir, made by Hawthorne Riley and given to her after the auction. She wore it on her coat. She wore it every day. The Florian Pembroke Memorial Foundation had its 3rd birthday last week. It funded scholarships for children who had lost their mothers. It funded grief counseling. It funded a small annual program that brought motherless children from low-income families on week-long nature retreats in the Pacific Northwest. The retreats were free, the buses were free, the food was free, the counselors were paid living wages. The foundation also had a smaller program, a quieter one. It paid for things, field trips, appendectomies, textbooks, headstones for poor families who could not afford them. It paid for these things anonymously. The recipients never knew where the money came from. They knew only that something had been quietly handled, quietly covered, quietly loved. Elspeth had patterned this part of the foundation on her great-uncle's life. She liked to think he would have approved. A niece of Imogene Pembroke, a woman in her 60s living in Yorkshire, had been found. Elspeth had flown to England with Linus and Beatrix. She had sat in a small kitchen in a stone cottage. She had told the woman the full story of her aunt's death. The woman had cried. Elspeth had cried with her. They had drunk 3 pots of tea. The woman had asked for nothing. Elspeth had quietly arranged for an endowment in Imogene's name at the British Museum, where Imogene had once been a librarian. The endowment funded the conservation of children's manuscripts. It seemed fitting. Augustus Penn had retired the year before. He had moved to a small place outside Glenmore with 2 dogs and a fishing rod. Elspeth and Linus visited him twice a year. He always made stew. Linus always called him Uncle Gus. Beatrix Yarrow had passed away that spring, quietly, in her sleep, reading a book. Elspeth had flown out for the funeral. She had given the eulogy. She had read aloud with a trembling voice the last letter Beatrix had written her. 3 short lines. Child, be kind, be brave, read books. Elspeth had put the letter in a frame. She had hung it in her kitchen. The morning was clear. The Pacific was loud. Linus had finished his driftwood structure. It was a castle. It was also a rocket. It was also a dragon. He was 9. He was allowed to be inconsistent. She heard him laugh. A child's clean, clear laugh. She did not realize at first that she had begun to cry. The tears were warm. They were not sad tears. She did not know what they were. She thought, Mom. She thought, are you watching this? She thought, are you proud? She thought, I hope you are proud. She wiped her face with the sleeve of her sweater. She pulled a folded paper from the pocket of her cardigan. She had carried it with her every day for 2 years. She unfolded it. She read the last line aloud. To the gulls, to the wind, to the small dark figure of her brother on the beach below. You did not inherit money, child. You inherited memory. Keep it better than I did. She folded the letter. She put it back in her pocket. She watched her brother run along the surf line, throwing his arms wide, yelling something to the friend, yelling something to the gulls, yelling something to no one in particular, and to everyone in the world at once. He was alive. He was loved. He had grown. And down the beach, beyond him, past the gulls and the pelicans and the gray rolling line of the Pacific, the sun was coming up, pink and gold and quiet over a world that had been for a small girl in a Tacoma kitchen 2 years ago, a flat, gray, hopeless thing. It had not been hopeless. It had only been waiting. Elspeth Kavanaugh leaned against the balcony rail. She closed her eyes. She let the wind take her face. She listened to her brother laugh. And somewhere, in whatever quiet country the dead live in, an old man in a forest house heard her too.